The debriefing room in Luna Command felt like a tomb. Dr. Marcus Holloway's hands trembled as he placed the final data tablet on the steel table. 6 months of hell distilled into cold intelligence reports. Admiral Nathan Corver had seen broken men before, but Holloway carried a different kind of damage, the weight of knowledge that could either save Earth or condemn it. "They made us watch," Holloway whispered, his voice cracking on the words. "On Kantara Prime, when the resistance cell was discovered. They didn't just execute the fighters. They brought their children to the execution ground first. Made the parents choose, surrender completely, or watch their kids die before their own execution." Corver's jaw tightened. He'd read the reports, but hearing it from someone who'd lived it was different. "Marcus, I need you to focus. What did you learn about their network?" Holloway's laugh was bitter, broken. "Everything, Nathan. They kept us alive as leverage, but they didn't think we were paying attention. 6 months of watching them coordinate 17 worlds through quantum relay stations. 6 months of memorizing how they maintain an empire built on fear." He pulled up a holographic display with shaking hands. "And 6 months of realizing their strength is also their death sentence." The quantum communication network spread before them like a glowing nervous system. Relay stations positioned across dozens of star systems, maintaining perfect synchronization that allowed instantaneous coordination across impossible distances. "It's beautiful, and it's terrifying," Holloway continued, steadier now. "Cut 1 relay, and the system compensates. Cut 2, and it adapts. But if you could coordinate massive interference across multiple nodes simultaneously." "The whole network crashes," Corver finished. It was brilliant. It was also impossible with Earth's current technology. The alarm klaxons shattered their planning session like breaking glass. Through the reinforced viewport, death materialized from hyperspace. 12 Viridian dreadnoughts, each the size of a city, flanked by 40 escort vessels that bristled with weapons designed to crack planets. Corver felt his mouth go dry as he calculated the odds. Earth's entire defense fleet wouldn't last 10 minutes against that firepower. "Jesus," Holloway breathed. "It's exactly what they did to the Gentari. Same formation, same tactical positioning. They're not even trying to be creative." Admiral Thaxton's image filled every screen on Earth within the hour. The Viridian commander possessed the casual arrogance of someone who had never faced a peer opponent. Tall, imposing, with the dead eyes of a man who measured success in conquered worlds. His voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Humans of Earth, I am Admiral Thaxton of the Viridian Empire. You stand at a crossroads that 17 species have faced before you. Lower your pathetic flags, abandon your primitive nationalism, and accept integration into our empire. Your symbols mean nothing against our firepower." Corver's daughter Sarah appeared on his personal communicator, her 15-year-old face tight with fear. "Dad, they're showing the ships on every channel. Are we going to be okay?" The lie came easier than it should have. "Yes, sweetheart. We're going to be fine. Stay with your mother, keep the emergency kit ready, but don't worry. Your old man has a few tricks left." Sarah's smile was tremulous but trusting. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, kiddo. More than all the stars." The transmission ended, and Corver stared at his reflection in the blank screen. In 72 hours, Sarah might be dead or worse, raised as a Viridian guest, like the children he'd seen in Holloway's intelligence reports. The thought filled him with a cold rage that burned like ice in his chest. "Nathan," Holloway said quietly, "there's something else. During the diplomatic mission, some of my security team went missing. Officially, they died in a transport accident." Corver looked up sharply. "Unofficially?" "Colonel Jake Brennan's people have been in deep cover for 6 months. They're already in position across 7 Viridian systems, including the capital." Holloway's damaged smile held the first hint of hope Corver had seen. "While I was being their prisoner, my boys were becoming invisible." The pieces clicked into place with crystal clarity. The communication blackout they'd need for Operation Network Crash wasn't just possible. It was already being prepared by men who'd spent half a year learning to be ghosts in the Viridian machine. "The quantum scramblers," Corver said. "You said we'd need to get them close to their fleet." "Close enough to disrupt line-of-sight confirmation protocols," Holloway confirmed. "Their coordination depends on real-time tactical updates. If we can break that even temporarily, their perfect formations become individual ships making independent decisions." Corver stood and walked to the viewport, staring at the alien fleet that held his daughter's life in its weapons. "Marcus, tell me honestly, what are our chances?" Holloway was quiet for a long moment. "Of surviving? Almost zero. Of taking them down with us in a way that matters? Maybe 50-50? Those are better odds than I expected." Corver activated his command communicator. "All fleet commanders, secure briefing in 30 minutes. Operation Network Crash is authorized." As Earth's governments debated surrender and civilians huddled in shelters, Admiral Corver began issuing orders that would either save humanity or ensure their sacrifice counted for something. The countdown to Earth's supposed surrender had begun, but it was also counting down to Admiral Thaxton's education in what human symbols really meant. The flag his daughter had given him for his last birthday, a small Earth banner she'd sewn herself, sat folded in his desk drawer. After this was over, one way or another, flags like that would fly free or not at all. There would be no middle ground. Captain Elena Vasquez watched the Pentagon dissolve into molten slag through the tactical feed and felt her world end. 17 seconds of plasma cannon fire had erased the symbol of Earth's military power, and Admiral Thaxton hadn't even bothered to use his main guns. "All ships, this is Admiral Corver," the comm crackled with determination that felt like a lifeline. "Execute network crash. Make it count." Vasquez keyed her ship's intercom aboard the UES Yorktown. "This is the captain. We're going in hard and fast. Some of you have families watching this on the feeds. I want you to remember, we're not dying today. We're buying tomorrow." The human fleet broke from defensive formation with desperate speed. 6 cruisers and 24 frigates accelerated toward the Viridian battle line in what every tactical manual would call suicide. On Earth, families watched their loved ones charge impossible odds while emergency broadcasts urged evacuation from major cities. Sarah Corver pressed her face against the shelter window, watching streaks of light in the sky that represented her father's fleet. "Mom, why are they going toward the bad guys?" Admiral Nathan Corver, racing toward certain death aboard the flagship Defiant, felt his daughter's question echo in his mind. "Because sometimes you have to run toward the thing that scares you most, sweetheart. Because symbols only matter when someone's willing to die for them." "Plasma cannon signatures spiking," his tactical officer reported. "They're locking onto our lead elements." "Deploy the packages on my mark," Corver ordered. The chaff spreading from his ships looked like defensive countermeasures to Viridian sensors. In reality, Dr. Holloway's quantum scramblers were about to teach Admiral Thaxton that technological superiority meant nothing when your enemy understood it better than you did. Aboard the VSS Dominion, Admiral Thaxton watched the human charge with professional interest. Maintain formation. Their destruction will serve as the final demonstration of Imperial power. The scramblers activated at exactly 13:47 hours, flooding the space between the fleets with quantum interference. The effect was immediate and catastrophic to Viridian battle doctrine. Thaxton's perfectly synchronized dreadnoughts suddenly lost their quantum link targeting solutions. The centralized fire control system that allowed devastating alpha strikes began receiving corrupted data. Most critically, the formation commands that should have reached his escort vessels in nanoseconds began experiencing multi-second delays. "What is this?" Thaxton demanded, his composure cracking for the first time in decades. "Some kind of interference," his weapons officer replied, fingers flying over controls. "Individual ship weapons are operational, but fleet coordination is compromised." For the first time in his career, Admiral Thaxton felt something he'd never experienced commanding a Viridian fleet: uncertainty. The choreographed destruction that had crushed 17 species was falling apart in real time. Captain Vasquez drove the Yorktown through Viridian formations like a knife through silk. Her inferior weapons focused on quantum relay antenna arrays rather than attempting to penetrate dreadnought armor. It was tactically sound. They couldn't kill Viridian warships, but they could blind them. "Captain!" her communications officer shouted over the battle noise. "We're Reese, hiving a transmission from deep space. Colonel Brennan confirms Phoenix teams are in position." 8,000 light-years away, Colonel Jake Brennan crouched in maintenance tunnels beneath the Xerian relay station, listening to the sounds of Earth's fleet dying through encrypted channels. Each ship's death scream was another step closer to his activation signal. "Come on, Nathan," he whispered into the darkness. "Give me that signal." The Yorktown died as heroes die, screaming defiance at impossible odds. Captain Vasquez's final transmission echoed across both fleets. "For Sarah, for all our children, remember us." Her ship's death took the VSS Retribution's primary relay array with it, severing the dreadnought's quantum link to the fleet network. One by one, Earth's vessels were systematically destroyed, but each death cost the Viridians something more precious than hulls and lives: their perfect coordination. When the last human frigate exploded against the VSS Supremacy's shields, Admiral Thaxton commanded 12 individual dreadnoughts operating on separate tactical networks. The quantum scramblers had died with the human fleet, but their damage was done. "Admiral," his communications officer said, voice tight with concern, "we've lost contact with Central Command. The interference is generating system-wide communication blackouts." Thaxton stared at the wreckage of Earth's defense fleet. The humans had died to accomplish what? Temporary communication disruption that would fade within hours? 3 star systems away, Colonel Brennan's equipment registered the quantum interference from Earth's sacrifice. The signal he'd waited 6 months to hear had finally come. "Phoenix teams, this is Overwatch," Brennan whispered into his encrypted communicator, thinking of Captain Vasquez and her final words. "Network crash is active. For Sarah and all our children. Execute Phase 2. The viral programs uploaded into 7 quantum relay stations simultaneously were Dr. Holloway's masterpiece, elegant code designed to spread through the Viridian network like cancer. Unlike the crude scramblers that had died with Earth's fleet, these viruses were patient, subtle, and devastating. Within hours, routine maintenance errors began cascading through the Empire's communication backbone. Fleet coordination protocols that had maintained Imperial control for decades suddenly couldn't reach their destinations. Garrison commanders found themselves cut off from Central Command, their orders obsolete, their reinforcement requests lost in quantum static. On 17 conquered worlds, Viridian forces began consolidating for defensive positions rather than maintaining occupation duties. Following standard protocol in the absence of clear orders, they abandoned the populations they had spent decades suppressing. It was exactly what the conquered species had been waiting for, and exactly what Colonel Brennan's intelligence packages would help them exploit. Admiral Thaxton, orbiting Earth in his communications-dead flagship, had no way of knowing that Captain Vasquez's sacrifice for Sarah and all our children had just cost him an empire. The human flag that 15-year-old Sarah Corver had sewn for her father would soon fly over conquered worlds, carried by men who remembered why they were fighting. Kent Valorian had been dreaming of this moment for 16 years. The Gentari resistance leader crouched in the ruins of what had once been his childhood home, watching Viridian patrol transports evacuate the capital's outer districts through stolen surveillance equipment. 16 years since he'd watched his younger sister dragged aboard a transport to become a guest on Viridian Prime. 16 years of building networks, gathering intelligence, and waiting for the Empire's moment of weakness. That moment had arrived with a human voice speaking perfect Gentari. Freedom Fighters of Gentari Prime. This is Colonel Jake Brennan of Earth Defense Command. We have successfully disrupted Viridian communication networks. Your oppressors are operating blind. Intelligence packages are now being transmitted with enemy force dispositions, weapon cache locations, and tactical vulnerabilities. Your children call to you from Viridian Prime. The Empire's coordination is broken. Answer them. The data that followed was impossible. Security codes Kent's network had spent years trying to acquire, patrol schedules updated in real time, ammunition depot locations that intelligence assets had died trying to discover. Most incredibly, personal communication frequencies of Viridian officers, allowing the Resistance to monitor their enemies' confusion as orders failed to reach their destinations. Kent's lieutenant, scarred from torture sessions that had failed to break their cell, stared at the intelligence stream in disbelief. How do they know our language? How do they know about the children? They were prisoners, Kent whispered, understanding flooding through him. The human diplomats. They were prisoners like our children. They saw everything, remembered everything. He stood, feeling 16 years of helpless rage transforming into something more powerful. Hope backed by capability. 300 light-years away, Commander Vex received his first indication that the Empire was collapsing when his morning briefing failed to arrive from Central Command. The Viridian officer had maintained order on the Gentari homeworld through precise scheduling and overwhelming information superiority. Without real-time intelligence from his superiors, he found himself commanding an occupation force with orders that were 18 hours old. Central Command, this is Gentari Garrison Control, Vex transmitted, professional composure masking growing concern. Request immediate situation update and tactical guidance. The response came 6 hours later, fragmentary and useless. Technical difficulties across multiple sectors, maintain defensive positions, communication restoration estimated. For the first time since the conquest, Commander Vex was operating without the Empire's technological advantage. Standard protocol was clear: consolidate forces to protect the critical infrastructure. That meant abandoning civilian population centers and falling back to defensible positions around the spaceport and communication facilities. The withdrawal began within hours, and with it, 16 years of absolute Viridian control over the Gentari people. Kent's forces struck the abandoned weapons depot at dawn, using security codes provided by their human allies. The Viridian guards, cut off from central coordination and operating on obsolete patrol schedules, never saw them coming. Inside the depot, enough military-grade equipment to arm a small army waited for hands that had dreamed of holding such weapons for over a decade. For Lyra, Kent whispered, running his fingers along a plasma rifle while thinking of his sister somewhere among the stars. For all the children who never came home. The uprising spread like wildfire across 14 conquered worlds. The Valian mountain clans emerged from their hiding places with targeting data for Viridian supply convoys. The Morith ocean cities used sonar frequencies the Empire didn't know they possessed to coordinate underwater strikes on coastal installations. The Cortan desert nomads appeared from the wasteland like avenging spirits, guided by intelligence that revealed every Viridian patrol route and supply cache. But the viral infection wasn't content with communication delays. Colonel Brennan's masterpiece spread deeper into the quantum network, corrupting tactical databases, scrambling supply requisitions, and redirecting personnel assignments. Viridian soldiers scheduled for rotation found themselves stranded on distant worlds. Critical spare parts for military equipment were shipped to wrong star systems. Most devastatingly, the centralized command structure that had maintained imperial unity was dissolving into isolated pockets of confusion. Private Nenth, manning a checkpoint outside the Gentari capital, watched resistance fighters emerge from ruins carrying weapons that should have been in secure storage. They moved with the confidence of soldiers who knew exactly where their enemies were positioned and how to avoid defensive kill zones. "Sir," he called to his section commander, voice cracking with strain. They're using our tactical frequencies. They know our patrol schedules. How is that possible? The section commander had no answer because the truth was inconceivable. The technologically superior Viridian Empire was being outmaneuvered by species they had dismissed as primitive. The basic assumption underlying their military doctrine, information superiority, no longer applied. Commander Vex learned the full scope of the disaster when fragmentary reports from other sectors finally reached his communications array. Massive coordinated uprising. Resistance forces have detailed intelligence on our positions. Casualties mounting. Request immediate reinforcement. Communication with Central Command lost. On his tactical display, red indicators showed Viridian installations falling across the Gentari homeworld. But more troubling were the psychological reports from his remaining forces. Soldiers who had spent their careers believing in technological superiority were watching supposedly broken species launch precision attacks with inside knowledge of Viridian weaknesses. The Empire's invincibility was revealed as an illusion, and illusions were fragile things when exposed to determined resistance. As the first liberated cities declared independence and broadcast their success across hijacked communication networks, the psychological foundation of Viridian rule began its final collapse. Conquered species who had endured decades of oppression discovered that their oppressors could be outmaneuvered. Their technology turned against itself, their coordination shattered by patient planning and sacrifice. Kenth Valorian stood in the ruins of the Viridian district headquarters, watching his people plant their ancestral banners where the imperial standard had flown for 16 years. In his hands, he held a photograph smuggled from Viridian Prime, children taken as hostages, including a girl who looked heartbreakingly like his sister Lara had at age 7. "We're coming," he promised the photograph. "The humans showed us the way home." 3 star systems away, Colonel Brennan monitored the cascading failures through captured intelligence channels. The virus had exceeded Dr. Holloway's most optimistic projections, but the real test lay ahead. The flag folded in his equipment pack had traveled 6 months and countless light years for one purpose. Soon it would fly over the Viridian capital, and Admiral Thaxon would learn that some symbols were worth any sacrifice. Admiral Thaxon stood before the tactical display in his communications-dead flagship, watching his empire die in real time. The red indicators spreading across the hologram told a story that violated everything he understood about military science. 17 worlds in coordinated rebellion, his garrison forces cut off from command, and reports filtering through the deteriorating network spoke of impossible things. Conquered species fighting with detailed intelligence about Viridian operations. "Admiral," Communications Officer Lineth reported, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "We've confirmed total network cascade failure across 7 sectors. This isn't equipment malfunction. Someone has systematically destroyed our quantum communication infrastructure." The realization hit Thaxon like a physical blow. The human fleet's suicidal charge hadn't been desperation. It had been misdirection. While he congratulated himself on Earth's conquest, human operatives had been dismantling the technological foundation of his empire from within. "How?" he whispered, staring at the tactical display. "Our quantum relay stations are the most secure installations in known space." But even as he spoke, memory provided the answer. Dr. Marcus Holloway's diplomatic mission. 6 months of imprisonment on Viridian worlds, officially as guests being evaluated for integration. In reality, they had been hostages ensuring human compliance. Or so Thaxon had believed. 8,000 light-years away, Colonel Jake Brennan ascended through the service corridors of the Viridian Parliament building, his pulse steady despite the magnitude of what he was attempting. 6 months of living as communications technician Class 7 Jarek Morveth had taught him that security systems designed to prevent external assault were vulnerable to patient internal sabotage. The false identity had been meticulously crafted during his imprisonment. Biometric scans, work authorizations, security clearances assembled using data stolen from actual personnel records. The Empire's bureaucracy was vast enough that one additional technician among thousands drew no attention, especially one whose psychological profile showed proper deference to Viridian authority. The parliamentary complex's quantum communication hub lay 17 levels below the main government chambers, protected by redundant security systems and automated defenses. Brennan had spent weeks studying the access routes, memorizing guard rotations, identifying the critical vulnerabilities in systems designed by minds that couldn't conceive of their own fallibility. At 0347 local time, his virus package infected the parliamentary communication network with surgical precision. Unlike the gradual degradation spreading across the Empire, this attack was immediate and total. Security systems, automated defenses, alarm protocols, everything depended on quantum coordination that suddenly no longer exist. Brennan thought of Captain Vasquez as he disabled the building's internal security. "For Sarah and all our children," she had said in her final transmission. The 15-year-old girl who had sewn a flag for her father represented every child who deserved to grow up free, and that flag was coming home to roost in the heart of the Empire that threatened them. The Parliament chamber was a monument to Viridian supremacy, its walls displaying holographic representations of 43 conquered worlds. Representatives from those worlds sat in tiered galleries, their positions deliberately arranged to emphasize subordination to imperial authority. Most were descendants of conquered leaders, raised from birth to serve the system that had destroyed their ancestors' independence. Brennan emerged from the maintenance access behind the speaker's podium and began his work with methodical precision. The communication override he installed would hijack the emergency alert system that every Viridian citizen was required to monitor, broadcasting simultaneously to every functioning relay station across the Empire. As he unfolded Earth's flag, the same design that 15-year-old Sarah Corver had sewn for her father, Brennan felt the weight of humanity's desperate gambit. If this moment failed to shatter Viridian morale, Earth would face retaliation beyond anything Admiral Thaxon had initially threatened. The hijacked broadcast began at 1200 Standard Time, reaching every populated world simultaneously. Citizens of the Viridian Empire, I am Colonel Jake Brennan of Earth Defense Command, speaking to you from your parliamentary chamber. For 6 months, human intelligence operatives have studied your systems, learned your weaknesses, and prepared for this moment. The flag of Earth now flies where your imperial standard once stood, and your empire dies with it. The camera feed showed Brennan standing before Earth's banner in the very heart of Viridian power. Behind him, tactical displays broadcast real-time intelligence to resistance movements across 17 worlds, troop deployments, communication codes, supply routes, weapons stockpiles. Your leaders told my people that our symbols meant nothing, Brennan continued, his voice carrying across the galaxy to every screen, every communicator, every emergency receiver. But symbols represent ideas, and the idea of freedom cannot be conquered by force alone. Every species you have subjugated still dreams of liberty. Today, we give them the tools to reclaim it. Aboard the VSS Dominion, Admiral Thaxon watched his career collapse in real time. The broadcast was reaching his own crew, showing them that their supposedly invincible capital had been penetrated by a single human operative using intelligence gathered during months of imprisonment. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "we're receiving reports from the Gentari system. Garrison forces are requesting immediate evacuation. They report coordinated attacks using detailed intelligence about our operations." The psychological impact was devastating. Viridian soldiers who had spent careers believing in imperial invincibility were watching a human plant his flag in their parliament while broadcasting their tactical secrets to conquered enemies. The technological superiority that had maintained their empire was proving useless against an enemy that fought with patience, intelligence, and determination. "Admiral," Communications Officer Lineth's voice cracked under strain, "I'm receiving desertion reports from 7 sector commanders. Our forces are refusing to continue occupation duties without Central Command support." Thaxton looked around his bridge at officers who no longer met his eyes. The chain of command that had held the Empire together was shattering as individual commanders lost faith in central authority. How could rational soldiers maintain confidence in victory when their most secure installation could be breached by a single enemy operative? The final psychological blow came when Brennan's broadcast revealed the full scope of human operations. For 72 hours, human teams have systematically destroyed quantum relay stations across your empire. Your coordination network is beyond repair. Your scattered forces cannot be reinforced or resupplied. Your conquered worlds are declaring independence as I speak. On the tactical display, red indicators showed the scope of the collapse. 17 worlds in open rebellion, communication networks failing across dozens of systems, garrison commanders requesting evacuation rather than reinforcement. The Viridian Empire, built over 3 centuries of careful expansion, was dying in real time. Admiral Thaxton's hands trembled as he reached for his command console. The empire he had served his entire life was finished, killed not by superior firepower, but by an enemy that understood the power of symbols backed by sacrifice. The human flag flying over Viridian Prime would become the beacon that guided conquered species to freedom, and Admiral Thaxton would be remembered as the man who learned too late what symbols truly meant. 18 months after the Empire's collapse, Admiral Nathan Corver stood in the same parliamentary chamber where Colonel Brennan had planted Earth's flag, addressing delegates from 23 liberated worlds. The formal dissolution ceremony was taking place in a room that had once symbolized oppression, but now represented something unprecedented in galactic history: voluntary cooperation between equals. Sarah Corver, now 17 and serving as Earth's youth ambassador, sat in the front row. She had sewn the flag that flew behind her father, but she had also lived through the orbital bombardment that made its planting necessary. The girl who had asked, "Are we going to be okay?" had grown into a young woman who understood that freedom was never guaranteed. It was earned through sacrifice. The Viridian Empire died the moment its citizens realized that technological superiority without moral authority creates only the illusion of strength, Corver said to the assembled representatives. Today, we formalize something far more durable, an alliance based on mutual aid rather than domination. In the gallery, Admiral Thaxton listened with the expression of a man who had spent 18 months learning the difference between commanding through fear and leading through trust. His court-martial had been swift but fair. The fragmented Viridian government needed his strategic expertise more than his punishment. The process had been neither simple nor gentle. Dr. Marcus Holloway, his imprisonment trauma transformed into purpose as Earth's chief xenological advisor, had spent months on different worlds helping establish communication protocols. The intelligence networks that had shattered the Empire were being repurposed to prevent future conflicts through information sharing rather than subterfuge. The hardest part, Holloway reflected during one council session, wasn't technical. It was teaching species that had been enemies for generations that cooperation didn't mean subjugation. Every conversation began with the question, "How do we know you won't become the next empire?" The individual sector negotiations had revealed the true scope of Viridian oppression. Commander Vex, the former garrison leader on Gentari Prime, had voluntarily provided detailed records of resource extraction operations. 70% of the planet's rare minerals had been shipped to Viridian Prime over 16 years. The Morith ocean cities had lost half their population to forced relocation programs designed to concentrate useful workers while eliminating excess populations. But liberation had also revealed unexpected strength. Kenth Valorian, now serving as Gentari Prime's elected representative, had discovered that his sister Lyra was alive among the hostages on Viridian Prime, alive and part of an underground network that had been gathering intelligence for eventual rebellion. "We never stopped planning," Lyra had told her brother during their reunion. "Even as children, we maintained our languages, our customs, our hope. The Viridians thought they were raising loyal Imperial citizens. Instead, they created the most motivated intelligence network in galactic history. General Jake Brennan, promoted after his successful infiltration, had spent months working with former hostage networks to establish new security protocols. The goal wasn't to create another empire, but to ensure that no single point of technological failure could again threaten multiple worlds' independence. Symbols matter, Brennan explained to Alliance military officers, but only when they represent something people choose to believe in. The Viridians planted their flag on conquered worlds, but it represented oppression. Our flag represented the possibility of freedom, and more importantly, the proof that freedom was achievable. The new interstellar protocols were designed around technological redundancy and voluntary participation. No single communication network controlled Alliance coordination. No individual species possessed technology that others couldn't understand or maintain. Most critically, no military force was large enough to threaten multiple worlds simultaneously. The economic reconstruction had been equally complex. Worlds that had spent decades shipping resources to imperial centers needed to develop local industries and trade relationships. The Alliance had established resource-sharing agreements that allowed struggling worlds to rebuild while preventing any single species from achieving economic dominance. On the anniversary of the Empire's collapse, Admiral Corver requested a private meeting with Admiral Thaxon in the same conference room where the operation had been planned. The irony wasn't lost on either man, the conquered meeting with the conqueror in a space where roles had been forever reversed. "I've read your strategic analysis reports," Corver said, placing data tablets on the table between them. "Your insights into Imperial overextension have been invaluable for designing Alliance structure." Thaxon nodded slowly, his bearing carrying the weight of hard-learned wisdom. "It's easier to see systemic flaws after you've watched them destroy everything you believed in. The Empire's strength was coordination, but coordination became our greatest vulnerability when turned against us." "You understand now what you couldn't then," Corver observed. "Technology without wisdom creates more efficient ways to fail." The former Imperial Admiral was quiet for several moments. During his imprisonment, Dr. Holloway had said something Thaxon had dismissed as naive idealism. Freedom is an idea that can't be conquered by force alone. At the time, it had seemed like the desperate philosophy of the defeated. "Your Dr. Holloway was right," Thaxon said finally. "Ideas don't stop plasma cannons, but ideas motivate the people who build them. More importantly, ideas survive when technology fails." Through the conference room's viewport, both men could see the flags of 23 worlds flying together, symbols that represented not conquest, but cooperation, not dominance, but mutual defense. "The Alliance protocols you helped design prevent the mistakes your empire made," Corver continued. "No single points of failure, no technological dependence, no subjugation disguised as protection. And no symbols that represent oppression rather than hope," Thaxon added quietly. As their meeting concluded, Sarah Corver appeared in the doorway, the girl whose question, "Are we going to be okay?" had haunted her father through the darkest moments of humanity's struggle. "Dad, the ceremony's about to begin," she said, then nodded respectfully to Thaxon. "Admiral, thank you for helping us build something better than what came before." Thaxon studied the young woman whose father had risked everything to answer her childhood question. "Thank you for showing us that some questions are worth any sacrifice to answer correctly." The Free World's defensive alliance wasn't built on the ashes of the Viridian Empire. It was built on the understanding that true strength came from voluntary cooperation rather than imposed unity. Earth's flag still flew over the former Imperial Parliament, but now it was surrounded by the banners of 22 other worlds, each representing a species that had chosen freedom over security and cooperation over subjugation. Admiral Thaxon had learned, perhaps too late for his empire but not too late for the galaxy's future, that symbols mattered most when they represented ideas worth living for. The reckoning was complete, but the real work of building something worthy of the sacrifices made to achieve it was just beginning.